Welcome to Breaking the Lines Pod. I'm Arland.
My name is Akeem, and this is a Premier League podcast.
Match week 6, interesting match week. A lot of points dropped in places we did not think, or at least I didn't think that points would be dropped.
Yeah, man, an interesting match week for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get started. I mean, kicking us off was Brentford at home hosting United, a 3-1 victory for Brentford. And I know that you and I ran our predictions for this week, and I think you had United edging Brentford out, and I had a 2-2 draw. And I'll be honest with you, 3-1 result. I'm not necessarily surprised. Lot of stuff happened in this game. You know, from what people said should have been a red card, the penalty miss. I thought United was sort of all over the place. I didn't think that they deserved even a point from this game. It just seemed like, we were watching the same United we've been watching over the past couple of years. So I wouldn't say a surprise result, but definitely I think a disappointing result for United. And I know that, there's been a lot of talk about this game since on socials and everything and Memoriam, and there's been some rumors about, an emergency meeting with the board and whatnot, which we can get into. I don't know if you were able to catch this game or not, but what are your thoughts on it?
100% I watch this game. I'm not as crucial as you, mate, because honestly, I think that first goal, as much as how I think Brentford deserved to win, I think it was a foul on Cunha. So, and goals change game, obviously. They didn't start the best, but I think the goal changed the game. And then that just obviously flipped the game in Brentford momentum. So, a little bit, I guess, less crucial. I know I tipped them to win, and they weren't the best on the day, but I think 100%, I think that was a foul on Cunha on the build up.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that you brought that up because I thought it was a foul watching it live, and then they went back and they showed the replays, and um, I think this whole match was kind of dominated by, not only drop points, but also refereeing decisions all around, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I agree with you. I think it was a foul. And then while watching the game for the penalty, I didn't necessarily think that it was a red card just because, they're getting the penalty. It's kind of like double punishment or whatever. And then after the game, I was reading stuff online where, double punishment is thing if you're not even attempting to play the ball, right? I don't know the exact sort of verbiage of it, but, based off what I was reading, I think that it should have been a red card to, I forget who the player was that grabbed Mbemo down, but Bruno went up, missed the penalties. I agree with you. I think, there was a lot of things that went against United, but the reason I think I'm so harsh is just the performance in sort of its whole and its entirety, I think wasn't a great performance. You know what I mean? And I know, like you said, like it should have been a foul on Cunha. I haven't got your take on the red card situation yet, but I think that it should have been a red card plus a penalty. So some decisions went against them, but just overall, not a great performance. I mean, there was a couple of goalkeeping issues too, which I think that third goal, I mean, if my goalkeeper isn't saving that, I'm fuming, to be honest. So, and I know the game was already gone. I mean, it's 2-1 going up to 3-1, but you think about it, if it's a tight game, I just think it was a blunder from the Manchester United goalkeeper. But what are your thoughts on the red card? What did you think of it?
I agree. I think it was a red card for sure because he wasn't playing the ball and he was the last man. With the double jeopardy, I don't know. I think that's a red card. Looking at it and when I watched it, I think it was a red card. So for the double jeopardy, I kind of see it for the keeper in terms of the keeper coming out and if he misses. But I think when a player is through on goal on that like that and you decide to pull him down, yeah, I think that's a red card. So, but that was in the second half, obviously. I think in the 70th or something minute up there. It's like I said, everything that happens after, I do believe that Man U did deserve to lose. But in terms of how the game started, I just know, goals change games. And I just believe that one was a foul in the build up there, even after watching the replay. But they haven't given themselves anything to kind of, especially with Bruno missing the penalty. And they haven't looked good, you know what I mean? I'm just speaking from a point of view because I've been there. We've all been there as fans. But, when you want just those little things to go your way and it's just not going, and I feel like I could understand that perspective, but also understand that they deserve to lose the game 100%.
I agree with you. I think everything you pointed out kind of is valid, right? I was looking at the the match stats after the game and taking sort of like the eye test, watching the game, and then looking at the stats, and I was like, "Oh, it was a lot tighter game than, I kind of gauged by just watching the game." I mean, United had 56% possession. They beat Brentford on the expected goals. They beat them on shots. The only thing that Brentford beat them on was shots on target. So, and that was 8-6. It was a lot tighter on paper, but watching it, I think that United still have a long ways to go, which I don't think that, that was up for debate or anything. But one thing I was sort of impressed by was Šeško's involvement and not just the goal, take away, even if he didn't score that goal, but I think that he fought more than what I've seen previously this season from him, holding up the ball, trying to, be involved in the buildup and whatnot. So I think there's some promise there. I just think that if you go from that forward line, anything back from that forward line, so midfield, defense, and keeper, I honestly think you could add, Ronaldo on the left wing, Messi on the right wing, and put like a prime Lewandowski as a striker, and I don't think that that team changes anything. I mean, maybe puts away a few more chances, but it's not looking great, right? We haven't necessarily learned anything. I think if we learned anything, it's just that they're the same old United.
Yeah, I think the same. Like you said, the goalkeeper is a bit worrying, even on that second goal, right? He saved them a bit. They could have lost by a lot more, so we can't criticize him too much. But I think on that second goal, we just parried the ball straight back in, and then the shot came, the rebound, and just let it in. But like you said, it's just worrying, I think, all over that team at the moment in terms of are they going to find the right balance, etc. Do they even have the players to have the right balance at the moment? Stuff that we've talked about. So yeah, it's a little bit the same old United like we've seen. But just to touch on Sesko, like you were saying, I think even in the Chelsea game when I watched Sesko, you got to remember for the first goal, it was his flick on to Embuemo that caused the red card. So I think he was lively as well. It's a little bit of I think them trying to figure out how he plays and playing to his style, and they're gonna have to play more balls up to him, and maybe it's stick or stuff like that, or he flicks it on, whatever the case might be. But I think it's a little bit of it's early days, so they're trying to figure each other out, and hopefully, if there's anything, I think they can look from that as positive and try to build on that. I don't know how much building can happen, but yeah, one of the positive I think they can take from the game.
Well, moving on, I guess the next sort of set of games, I have Chelsea here in my notes. At home, hosting Brentford at the Bridge. I didn't watch this game. I watched back the highlights.
Brighton, Munich, mate. It's not Brentford, it was Brighton, Munich.
Brighton Munich again. It was, I mean, Brighton plays sort of an expensive way, and I'm sure you watched this game. And like I said, I didn't watch. I watched the highlights, but just kind of looking off the highlights and sort of how the game went. I mean, Enzo put Chelsea up 1-0 about midway through the first half, and he's actually been producing some numbers this year. I know that he did produce last year as well, but I was actually thinking of bringing him into my fantasy team. I haven't yet, but I might have to. I think he's been getting some decent numbers. But 1-0 up at halftime for Chelsea, and then a Chalobah red card in the 53rd minute, sort of in the beginning of the second half. Brighton got some goals sort of later on to win 3-1. From watching the highlights, early on, it looked like Chelsea was sort of dominating. There was nothing on the highlight reels as far as like Brighton creating any chances or anything like that. But I don't know, man. Again, another red card, and we're recording this on Wednesday, so we kind of know what's happening in the Champions League midweek, and another red card for Chelsea midweek. And I didn't see. I know it was 2 yellows for João Pedro. I don't know what's going on. I don't think it's necessarily a disciplinary problem. I think it's just kind of like how you mentioned before, a lack of maturity in the team. I think that's probably a better way to describe it than a disciplinary problem, which I'm sure the media, especially in England, jumps at those sort of things. But what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think up until, like you said, the red card obviously changed the momentum of the game. But I think even prior to the red card, watching the game, it was just like a lackluster performance from Chelsea, to be fair. We didn't offer much. We had most of the possession of the ball, but still just not offering much, not seeing much from the attacking players that we spent, so much money on last summer and previous windows. So I think above all, like, I think a reflection of the first six games has just shown a very tired and not mature Chelsea team. Even going down to 10 men, I think they have no one else to blame, right, but themselves, to be fair in that. And then right now, obviously switched their momentum and went for the win. With having the 1 minute advantage in the game, it was obviously better for them in the second half, so they went for it. But I think even prior to that, right, 1-0, Chelsea just didn't offer much to kind of, kill the game, as you say in England, had the game in where they wanted it in terms of possession and stuff, but still didn't offer much. I think João Pedro, we signed him this summer. Obviously, Liam Delap got injured, but João Pedro is not an out and out striker from what I can see. And our main thing against his low block is having, I wouldn't say necessarily a striker because everyone thinks it's a striker, but I think above all, the team shows that it's still a bit immature. And also, I think the manager has a bit of blame to take as well, taking out some of his best attacking players that had more, threat to offer. Even with 10 men, because, in the Premier League, you can win games with 10 men. I believe the bigger teams can win games or even draw a game and sheer game out with better defending. I think our center backs defending has been worrying for us in the first 6 games. Above all, it just shows how immature this team is. And honestly, we'll have to see as the season goes. We have to see how they mature, right? Because we can't really ever say. I think there's some worrying times ahead for us Chelsea fans if we don't pick it up for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that just a very honest kind of outlook on that game. I've mentioned this previously, but um I'm eager to see Chelsea and to see Chelsea get back to you know, I'd say not winning ways because obviously they're a rival and whatnot, but just to see a stronger Chelsea, I think it's better for the league itself. And I think that, you touched on this too, sort of in the previous pod, that these other teams, the original top four teams, have really let the league down in the last few years. And I think that Chelsea's probably the closest to sort of getting to that point. I think obviously, Arsenal is sort of there and challenging and whatnot. Sort of outside of Arsenal and Liverpool, I think Chelsea's the closest, in my opinion, to sort of getting there. I think they have a good manager to do it. I think, their recruitment has followed a certain philosophy, which I don't think that we can necessarily, say hasn't worked yet, just because I don't think that they're at the point where they can say, okay, now we think that we should be challenging, or now we think that we should be this, right? But I'm eager to see them, and I think that this game, like the United game, I think is sort of a one-off for them, right? You have red cards that sort of, change the game, and so we don't get to see sort of the true, I guess, true Chelsea in this game or in the last game.
I think, like you said, I think it's early as well, so we have to give them time, and also, coming back from the Club World Cup. But I just like to be honest about my team. Yeah, it's just worrying times, ill discipline from them. I'm not so worried about the red cards, to be fair with you, because I believe the red cards are kind of being immature and not understanding the game. And I'm not even upset at that red card. I'm more upset about the bad touch that led to the red card. I think anyone that watched the game would say the same thing. So more time to go, but if we don't pick it up for sure, I think we can find ourselves in worrying times when you put it in the context of what we talk about how United, right? I think what's the point? Don't know what the table looks like, but I believe United has the same amount of points as we do, or do they have less in 8 games?
One less point than you guys.
Right. So I think from 6 games, considering the start that we had, we also had one of the easiest starts, if you considered it in that way. So to have 8 points, it can be a bit worrying, but also, early starts to the season. So let's see what happens.
And that moves us to Selhurst Park and Crystal Madrid. I'm gonna go with Crystal Madrid. I know you like the Brighton Munich. Crystal Madrid with a what I think is probably sort of the result of the weekend, right? Performance of the weekend. And I watched the first half of this game. I couldn't catch the second half. I had to step out for a haircut, but I watched the first half, and I'll be honest with you, I think Crystal Palace could have been 4 or 5 up at half time. There was some chances that Crystal Palace created that were, I mean, just like golden opportunities that they were missing. But I left this game at halftime, Crystal Palace up 1-0, and I sort of thought to myself, okay, we'll see how they do. I was trying not to check the scores or anything. I just wanted to kind of see the final result. I left the barber shop, and it was the 90th minute, and it was 1-1. I was like, okay, you know what? That's a decent result for Crystal Palace, And I find myself driving home, pick up the phone, and just looking to see what the other results of the match week were. I see that Crystal Palace ended up pulling off a 90 plus 7-minute goal. The former Arsenal man, Edin Nketiah, putting Palace up 2-1 and taking all 3 points, and brilliant result for Crystal Palace. I think, it's just sort of adding to Oliver Glasner's reputation, right, what he's doing with that team. I think they have the longest unbeaten run in the top 5 leagues in Europe, which I think is like 18 games or something like that. Undefeated in the Premier League so far this year. They're sitting in 3rd place with 12 points from their first 6 games, and they've played some decent teams. They haven't had the easiest start. So brilliant result for them. I think I wouldn't say sort of Liverpool's luck ran out, because I think that, they had some chances watching back that second half. They had a couple chances where, they could have found the back of the net. But again, I mean, Crystal Palace could have found the back of the net in the first half multiple times. So, Allison came up big on some saves. I did have one thing I wanted to talk to you about, but I'll get your take on it first, and then we'll jump to my question for you.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this was definitely the result for the weekend with Palace. And what a performance by them as well. Like you said, I think they arguably, like you said, could have been up 3 or 4 by the half. It was just a brilliant, brilliant performance. I think Mateta hitting the post there. Allison, like you said, came up big and shows for me why he's the best goalkeeper in the Premier League. 1v1, I think no one's better than him, honestly. But I think on the day with the performance of Palace, yeah, it was just overall, I think, a great performance. Obviously, in the second half, Liverpool was better. I think at the start of the season, we've said it on the pod here that it's been a little bit, I wouldn't say concerning, but Liverpool performances haven't been convincing. Against 10-man Newcastle, they conceded 2 goals, and we talked about that. And here with 90 plus, they conceded the late winner. Another 2 goals conceded, especially when you think what they spent on that defense over the summer, right? For them in terms of what they wanted in return. I know they just won the title, so I think they were thinking about, replacing these players like for like in terms of Trent that went to Madrid, but also getting a younger and a better Kirkez on the other side for Robertson that's getting a bit older in age right now. But yeah, I think it's been a little bit, concerning for them. But I think as the season goes by, they'll figure it out and come good. I mean, it's only one defeat from the 6 games so far, so we can't really be too harsh on them. But I think it has been a little bit, concerning for them. Listening to the Liverpool fans that I know. And I think also a big thing that people are not talking about, but I think that Ekitike's suspension kind of cost them in that game, honestly, because he was playing well for them. I know Isak had a chance and kind of scruffed it onto the goalkeeper. But I think missing a Kitika in that game, I think even against us this weekend, I think he'll be a threat for them for sure, because he's one of those players that came in and just kind of slotted into the league. I mean, there's still plenty of games ahead, but in the first couple of games, he's looked, like he's been playing in the league for a couple of years. Even though we had some questions, I think the biggest question for Liverpool right now is, will Wirtz come good for them? That's one of the main concern, and also those fullbacks in terms of, will they be as sound as they want to be to win a title again, or will they be leaking goal and having to win games? Because there's still a concern, like we said, Salah in that game as well just didn't have a good performance, right? So I think, yeah, obviously early days, but for them and for Arsenal, I think encouraging sign for Arsenal, and Liverpool work to do on the training pitch.
I think you make a good point. Ekitike um, seemed like a miss, and I remember that there was a chance in the second half where I don't recall who had the chance for Liverpool, but I was watching sort of the highlights of the second half, and I thought to myself, Ekitike puts that away, you know? So I definitely think that they missed him. I think that Isak is not up to full fitness yet. But interesting, I don't know if you saw this actually today, but Ekitike came off with an injury in their Champions League game. So it's going to be interesting to see if he's able to be fit for the Chelsea game at the weekend. But I did want to ask you, I don't know if you saw Liverpool's goal, but I was online afterwards, and before I even watched any of sort of the second half highlights, I was seeing a lot of tweets on Twitter, basically showing Salah's involvement in that goal and the handball. There's one angle in particular where it looks like it does touch his hand, and I was just wondering if we're able to dissect something like that on Twitter, right? We're able to take the video, slow it down, and see that there is a touch, right? See that the ball sort of deviates. How does VAR not do that, right? And I don't know what your view on this is, but I think that from the videos that I've seen, it looks like there's a clear touch on the hand, right? It looks like you can see the ball in slow motion deflect from the hand and then fall back post for the goal for Chiesa. I don't know if you've had a chance to see like the videos or whatnot, but do you think that that should have been ruled out?
I think it was a handball, honestly. I think it was a handball. But I mean, for you and I, obviously, it's not something surprising. Not that I think it's something Liverpool wise where I'm going in that agenda. I think it's just in the Premier League, every week we kind of scratch our head with the decisions that we've seen made. I mean, obviously, we'll touch on it a little bit later, but we'll scratch our head about the decision made in the Newcastle Arsenal game that compared to decisions that we've seen made prior before. So I don't know. I think 100%. When I first saw it, I thought it was a handball. When I watched it again, slow down. I know it could be inconclusive, like they said, but in terms of, like you said, if we're able to find out on Twitter, right, I think it should be something, especially with the time taken with these ref reviewing the goal and stuff. I think we should be able to find that in not a quicker manner, but we should be able to get to that conclusion. And the fact that we're not just Saturday or this weekend, this past weekend, but weekend after weekend, we're not able to get to that conclusion in the Premier League. I don't know. It's a bit disappointing being the biggest league in the world. But yeah, I 100% agree. I think it was a handball. I think watching it right there in the first time when I saw it, I think it was a handball. And even after watching it again, I still think it's a handball. And I can understand both sides, but this is the Premier League. So
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I just wanted to gauge sort of what you were thinking. I know we hadn't discussed this at all, but I was like, I can't be sort of the only one, kind of thinking this, right? And I get the one-off refereeing decisions where, things are happening quickly and, you can't see everything, but that's necessarily what VAR is there for, right? To catch sort of stuff that, was missed. And I think, you can't blame the official in the center, but you can 100% blame the VAR. I mean, VAR shouldn't make any mistakes, right? Sometimes they take up to 5 minutes for a decision, right? The game is stopped 5 minutes in and, they're looking at things over and over again. And I think that this check for this goal was, I mean, I don't even think it was like 30 seconds, right? So I don't know, man. We've discussed this a lot, and I think you and I are both in agreement that the refereeing in the Premier League is not really up to par. And I wouldn't necessarily even fault it on the sort of the center ref, but more so on the VAR, right? VAR is there to catch, obvious errors, right? Whether that be offsides or red card decisions or penalties, right? Things that, obviously it's an incorrect decision. And it's not working well, right? But regardless of that, there's a lot more games this weekend. The next one we'll touch base on a little bit is the Leeds Bournemouth game at Ellen Road. Semenyo with uh, a nice free kick that you and I both will be happy about having him on our fantasy team. And then Leeds come back with I think it was Rondon with a header off a corner or a cross that resulted from a corner. 1-1 at halftime, and then Leeds took the lead with Longstaff. I think it was a brilliant strike by him. I don't know if it went in off the post, but I know that it was sort of in that upper right hand corner of the goal, kind of just shot out of nowhere. And they were, winning this game 2-1 until the 90th minute when Bournemouth got the equalizer. And I think I had Bournemouth to win this game. And I think that you actually gave Leeds a chance. But good result, I'd say, for Leeds, right? Getting a point. And then I honestly think, given sort of how the game seems to have gone, Bournemouth being down 2-1 until the 90th minute, I think that that's a great result for them too. It seems like, Bournemouth struggled a little bit off the corners watching the highlights. I will tell you this, Calvert-Lewin, if his name was Erling Haaland, he would have had a hat trick within 18 minutes of this game. I mean, watching back the highlights, he had some golden chances. I don't know if you were able to catch them, but he missed three chances that I thought that he absolutely should score.
yeah, I didn't watch this game. I was able to catch the highlights of this game, but very impressed by Leeds. Obviously, we talked about Leeds last week being impressive, but obviously being a promoted team back in the league, and also Bournemouth is an established team, as we said, a very good team as well in the league. Well, for me, I think the biggest thing that I take away from this Leeds team so far in the 6 games that I've seen is the manager, Daniel Fark. I remember he was in the league a few seasons back with Norwich City
Yep.
and tried to play a bit more expansive his way and stuff like that. So I think it's been a bit impressive what he's learned and he's able to bring Leeds back and kind of adapt himself, not just himself, but his team to the Premier League. So I was very impressed with the setup from Leeds. And like you said, Bournemouth there in the last minute, stealing a point, right? So Leeds almost got out of there with all 3 points, but still think something to be happy about. Semenyo, obviously, with that ball striking technique, like that guy won't be at Bournemouth for much longer. I'll tell you that honestly. But
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
yeah, I think from watching the game, from my side, I was more impressed with Leeds and Leeds manager, just how he's adapted to the Premier League. Because the Premier League can be cruel. I know every team wants to play in a certain way, especially when you're in your promoted team, and that way worked for you in the championship the season before. But I think when you get promoted, it's a different ball game. So I'm impressed by Leeds. Hopefully they keep it up. I'm always happy to see Leeds in the league. It's kind of one of those traditional teams. Yeah, I'm happy for Leeds.
That takes us to a fellow promoted side, Burnley, away to City at the Etihad, and I mean, this game kind of speaks for itself, right? City winning 5-1 on the day. And I think the most interesting thing about this was Estive, I think his name is, from Burnley, had 2 own goals. So honestly, I think we both expected City to run away with this game. Rodri was out. So I think that was an interesting thing to see how they fared without him. Obviously, it's Burnley, so you can't really sort of make too much of it. But one thing I was impressed on this game after watching back the highlights was I think Doku really is starting to sort of show himself for City. I know City have had a mixed start to the league so far, but I think he has 3 assists and 4 starts this year so far, and he's just proving to be sort of like a menace for, right-sided defenders in the Premier Leagues. I think that that's encouraging for City. I think getting Savinho back is also encouraging, but I've been impressed with Doku this year so far. I think last year kind of was disappointed in him. I felt like, he was losing the ball too much, not really completing successful take-ons. But this year so far, I think he's looking improved. That's my biggest takeaway from this game, I'd say. I think we both expected City to run away with this game, and they did.
Yeah, I was able to catch this game actually. It was an interesting game. I mean, I think, nil for City to start. I was watching the game. It was a decent game, and City went 1-0 up, and then Burnley came back 1-1. That player, Jaden Anthony for Burton, looks like he's going to be a nice little player in the Premier League, actually. And then after that, City kind of just ran away with it, right? But yeah, I think, like you said, my one of my biggest takeaway from this game is leaving this game was Phil Foden looked to be back to being himself again, especially in the last couple of games. But also Doku, like you said, man, I think Doku was an absolute menace. I think for like we just mentioned in the previous game for Daniel taking his team up and just being mature and adapting to the league. I think you've seen the similarity with Doku, right? He's learning. I think last year he wanted to be a bit more flashy, and it's okay to be flashy, but I think in the Prem, the space is so tight, right? It's very difficult for you to want to do those skills sometimes where you're moving the ball around a player because by the time you do that, there's another player there. I think he's finding himself and finding ways to play in the league. So I think for sure he'll be a threat. But yeah, I think interesting game up until 1-1 and then City absolutely just walked away with it. I mean, Haaland at the end there. I don't have Haaland in my fantasy, so I was happy watching the game all the way up until the last, couple minutes, and then he just scored 2 Haaland goals. But yeah, I think it would be an interesting season for City. I think my takeaway as well is obviously the good from Phil Foden, like I said, and Doku, but I'm interested to see what City season will look like because obviously with these mixed results so far, some season, some not season, but some weekends good and some weekends bad. I think it'll be an interesting season. So let's see what happened in game week 7 for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing before we move on this, we've kind of both said that City have had a mixed season so far. I honestly think that they're going to turn it around. I think that they're going to catch some form this year. I don't know that they will sort of win the league or challenge, I'd say, intensively, but I think that watching this City team and seeing Pep willing to kind of adapt I think that City will get some results this year. I think that they definitely will improve as the year goes on. And again, I mean, it's only 6 games in, they have 10 points. They're only sitting 5 points off the top, 3 points off Arsenal in second. So I think that, I think that they will get better. Rodri's injury is one to keep an eye on. I think that that kind of will dictate that. I think, we both sort of agree that he's key to that team, but I see them getting better. I see them getting better. That moves us to the City Ground for Sunderland. Ange can't catch a break in this league so far. 1-0 victory for Sunderland, goal in the 38th minute. I watched this game actually, and Sunderland sort of hung on for their life, and they just kept fighting till the very end, and they came away with the 3 points away to Nottingham Forest. So brilliant, brilliant victory for them. We've talked on sort of, the players that they've added in, and Granit Xhaka, obviously one of those players we've mentioned. 3 assists for him this year so far. He assisted the goal against Forest this weekend. They're sitting pretty in 5th place with 11 points from their first 6 games. And it seems like we say this every week where, if they would have given him this amount of points in their first however many games, they absolutely would have taken it. And they're just kind of moving along. Brilliant, brilliant result for them.
Yeah, I think that was a brilliant result for Sunderland, like we keep saying about these promoted teams. And like you said, man, and just can't catch a break at the moment. I think, the football gods probably looking down right now, Forest for what they've done to Nuno, honestly. But from watching the game, I think the takeaway was, Ange is just not changing. And we've talked about the players that Sunderland added. I think Sunderland has shown, not just Sunderland, but all these newly promoted teams have shown that, right? They've adapted and they're not just gonna come to the league and be naive anymore or whatnot. So yeah, I'm happy for them. I'm happy, like you said, I think they've added also quality in the squad. So it gives them a different dimension. They can play in different ways, like you said. I think the game for them was more a low block where they had to sit in, but they know that they'll get chances. I think it was a brilliant, brilliant free kick that led to the assist in the goal. And I think it overall it was a good game for Sunderland. But I think how many equalizing Ipswich 11 points? What Ipswich went down with 11 points last year, right?
Yep. Yep.
So I think equalizing that in 6 games, I think any promoted team will take that. So I'm happy for Sunderland. Long may continue on unless they play Chelsea. But yeah, good for them, man.
That brings us to the last game, and I actually like these sort of 3 o'clock kickoffs for us on the East Coast. I think it's something to kind of spend your whole Saturday watching the EPL. Who wouldn't want to do that, right? But Spurs at home, hosting Wolves, and a 1-1 draw for them there. 0-0 at halftime, ended up 1-1. Paulinho with a very good goal at the end of the game there. I thought overall, Spurs looked poor in this game. We've talked about this in recent weeks. We're waiting for Spurs to catch those Spursy moments and see how they sort of deal with them. And I think that this was, I wouldn't say like a big one, but definitely one, right? I mean, Wolves, haven't really had anything in the league. This was their first point. So they were coming into this game 5 losses out of 5 in the Premier League. I think poor result for Spurs, a good result for Wolves, their first point of the season. And I also honestly thought that Wolves deserved the 3 points in this game. I mean, I watched this game and they had some chances. They had some breakaways on the counter where they were winning 1-0 at the time. You just thought that they weren't sort of, not that they weren't taking these chances seriously, but I thought that they felt comfortable at 1-0. But some of these breakaways, I think that they should have made more of. Overall, I think disappointing result for Spurs and good result for Wolves.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway coming from this game was just wondering who are really the top goalkeepers in the Premier League. Because I watched a goal, I mean, Spurs conceded, right? It was just a blunder from their goalkeeper, honestly. And I think we talk about this like week in, week out about a goalkeeper pretty much picking up the headline. Last week it was Sanchez. This week is Vicario. But I think it's almost like every week, almost a goalkeeper in the Premier League picking up the headlines in terms of something goes wrong. So I think my biggest takeaway was who's the best keepers in the league nowadays because it's very hard to find, really good players or good goalkeepers nowadays, I feel. Especially when I watch a Premier League. I feel like you'll find some decent ones, but they're nothing special. You'll find, every 2 or 3 games, you have a couple mistakes or so in them. So I mean, above all, watching the game, I think for Wolves, I think they can feel a little bit hard done by a good goal from Paulinho, like you said. But on the overall of the game, I think Wolves deserve definitely to win the game. I think it was a poor performance. Any Spurs fan would, I don't know if any Spurs fan, but I think most Spurs fans would agree with you. Kind of a little bit of hot and cold of how they started their season. Some games very good and some games very bad.
It's interesting you mentioned the thing with the goalkeepers. I personally think that there's three goalkeepers in this league that are above the rest. I think that Allison probably is the top goalkeeper in the league, and honestly, I think probably the best goalkeeper in the world. And then I think in behind them, him, Donnarumma, and I think David Rea are sort of up there. I think the rest of them, like you said, that there's good goalkeepers. Even Sunderland's goalkeeper, I was very impressed with him at the weekend. I thought he made some good saves. But when Vicario first came to the league, I think Spurs had a decent run under Ange, and there was a lot of hype around him, and they were kind of putting him up there. But I think he has made some mistakes since, and I think that, you're absolutely spot on. I think that the goal was an absolute blunder from him. All right, that moves us into Sunday. Some big results Sunday. Villa coming away with 3 points, obviously at home, hosting Fulham. 3-1 victory for them. And I think that you actually had Villa to win this game, if I'm not mistaken. And I had Fulham to win this game. And it seems like Villa just, overpowered Fulham. And I think that it was coming in terms of, Villa's start to the season being really poor. I didn't watch this game, but I remember looking at the score early on and I saw that Fulham was up 1-0, and I was just thinking to myself, man, here we go. Villa just can't catch a break. They can't really do anything right. And then for them to come back and win this game 3-1 from being 1-0 down, I think shows good character from them. I think Watkins gets his first goal this season. That's very good news for Villa and Villa fans.
Yeah, I was happy for Villa in this one. I watched the game. I think they deserved the victory. And a little bit worrying for Fulham. Villa deserved to win on the day. Watkins had a great performance, I think, on the day, and he needed that after, I mean, going blank in his first, 5 games. I don't know if you were able to catch a game. I think that game for me this weekend produced one of the worst dives I've ever seen from a player when Josh King's mate. I don't know. I could just that's all I could think about after seeing this game. To be fair, I think, like I said, definitely a deserved win by Villa, and I think for Watkins, I'm very happy for him to perform again because I mean I had him in my fantasy to start the season. I had to sell him, but hopefully he keeps performing so I can add him back. But the takeaway from this game for me was just that horrible dive from just Josh Kings, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's hope that we don't see any more of those the rest of the season. And I'm sure that we will, to be honest. But that moves us into a very controversial game, a game that I personally will tell you, obviously I watched this game, and I'll be honest with you, I did not even enjoy the victory just because I was just so furious, and just so upset by that penalty reversal in the first half that it just kind of, stuck with me. Honestly, in my opinion, ridiculous decision. I can't even see how you would possibly call it the other way after seeing, some penalties given in this league, and, just absolutely just horrible. I mean, referee called a penalty on the field, and I was listening to this on the NBC commentary, and they're reviewing it, the VAR, and I thought that maybe after they were reviewing it, because we hadn't seen a replay yet, I thought that maybe Gyökeres dove was kind of my initial reaction, right? Just because the angle kind of zoomed out that we were watching the game in sort of live time. I thought the only thing that it could possibly overturn that would be if he dove and there was no contact made from the goalkeeper, right? And then you hear the commentators start talking how the VAR is trying to convince the referee to overturn the decision, that they're able to hear the VAR speaking to the referee. And I just sat and thought to myself, like, you've absolutely got to be kidding, I mean, Gyökeres gets to the ball first, moves the ball to the side, and as he's moving the ball to the side, it hits Pope's foot, but it doesn't go far enough to where you say if Gyökeres stays on his feet, he can't reach it, right? He can absolutely reach it. Also, Saka was there too. Saka could have reached it. Ultimately, the penalties reversed, and I'm just thinking to myself, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, he's clearly brought down by the goalkeeper. Goalkeeper clearly impedes his ability to get to the ball, regardless of if there's a touch or not. I mean, it's not like Nick Pope won the ball, but that decision alone just kind of ruined the rest of the game for me. I mean, I was just furious, and then obviously, of course, sort of as the game went on, Newcastle scored, and I thought it was a good goal by Voldemade. I thought Gabriel was actually very soft in going down. I think that he felt a touch and he went down, and obviously no foul there. I don't think that there was even sort of a chance of that being a foul. And then the game went on in the second half, and I honestly wasn't upset with Arsenal and how they played up until they scored. I think that, they tried different things. They had a couple good chances. Trossard actually before, I think this was actually before the Newcastle goal hit the post, which I think he should have finished 100%. It's actually funny. I read on Twitter that Trossard coming in as a substitute would have finished that goal. But I thought that that was a good chance. In the second half, there was a good chance where Timber headed the ball and Nick Pope made a good save, a very good save. So I think Arsenal created some chances. I don't think that it was sort of like a repeat of a City game where they were struggling to create chances, or the Liverpool game. Ultimately, Mikel Merino comes in and scores a header, and then Gabriel scores a header off a corner to win the game. One other thing I wanted to mention in this game too was there was another shout for a penalty, which I think that I don't even know if VAR reviewed or not, but Bruno Guimaraes actually handled the ball in the box from a Martinelli shot. And I think that this was before Arsenal's first goal, where his arm was outstretched. The from his shoulder down, it was in, but from his elbow to his hand was outstretched from his body, and a clear handball. And VAR does not review this in the box either. Which added to my frustrations. So I thought that I thought it was just one of those games where I don't know if you remember a couple years back where, the ball sort of looked like it went outside and Newcastle crossed it in and scored. And I think ultimately we lost that game 1-0 at St. James Park. I thought it was going to be a repeat of that sort of instance. And, I was thinking to myself, Liverpool drop points, perfect chance for Arsenal to kind of catch up a little bit to them. And I don't want to say I didn't see us scoring. Time kept going down, and I was like, yeah, even if we score, we're going to draw this game. We're not going to win it. It's too late, not enough time, and we ended up winning. And I thought that it was brilliant sort of fight put up by our team. Odegaard coming back in, I thought looked a lot better. Him and Eze on the pitch at the same time, I thought was a good sort of threat to have. I don't know how Arteta's going to plan them two both being fit now, but I thought that them both being on the pitch sort of added two different ways of unlocking a defense. And Newcastle, puts up a good fight with all the big teams. They have a pretty solid defense, and I think they're set up pretty well by Eddie Howe. I was a little disappointed in Saka. I thought I don't know if it's a fitness thing, but I didn't think he looked really up to par in this game. I would have loved to see Madueke, be available and him come on and kind of just see sort of the threats that we've seen from him in the first few games. Good result. Ultimately, I'll be honest with you, I did not enjoy it as much as I should have from that penalty decision.
Yeah, I don't know how VAR looked at that and thought that was not a penalty. I mean, looking at it from a neutral point of view, honestly, I thought it was a penalty. I thought that was a crazy decision, another crazy decision that we can talk about each week, about VAR and the referees in the Premier League. But I mean, overall, I think watching the game, I think Newcastle looked solid. Like you said, I think it was a great goal. From their point, I think it was a bit soft on Gabriel's point of view to go down, especially when Gabriel the way he is. But I mean, from Arsenal, right? I think in the second half it was a much better second half from them. And like you said, I think no one can be really upset in terms of the way the game went, especially in the second half. Arsenal walking out with all 3 points. I think Newcastle, if they walked out with a draw, it would have been a fair result as well. But I think from the way the second half went, like you said, I don't think anyone can be as disappointed in Arsenal leaving with the result. And I think for where Arsenal is right now, they need the result for sure, especially keeping up with Liverpool. And I think that would have been a big gap too early in the season. Not that it could have been closed, but it was been a big gap just too early in the season for them. So yeah, I think a good 3 points for Arsenal. And from based on the second half, it deserved 3 points. On the Bruno penalty, I don't know if I agree in that necessarily being a penalty, just because I understand that they hit his hands, but I think from the law and what they're trying to do this season, I wouldn't agree in that being a penalty because I didn't see him making himself bigger. I think when you're in the box, a natural defender obviously puts their hands behind their back. He's not necessarily a defender. I'm not trying to excuse him, but for a defender, they understand that because of what's going on. But I think for sometimes other players on the field, they're not necessarily as quick as the defenders to move their hands. So I don't think he necessarily made himself as big because he didn't put his hand out any bigger. I think he was just, moving himself out of the way to try to block the ball or whatever he could in the best way possible. So I don't know if I necessarily agree, but definitely in the first half, I agree with the one on Gyökeres being a penalty.
The Bruno one, I think, is a penalty because I think his hand is outstretched, but I can see it because from his shoulder to his elbow, it's not outstretched, right? It's just from his elbow out. So that's something that I can say is up to sort of interpretation. But the Gyökeres one, I mean, I was lost for words, honestly. But good 3 points, good news midweek in terms of Saliba signing a new contract. I think that that's good for Arsenal. Getting Odegaard back, I think, is very good for us as well. And then that takes us into the final game of the match week, which was on Monday. Uh, Everton West Ham, a 1-1 draw at the Hill Dickinson Stadium. I watched this game and I thought that it was a really sort of dull game. And not to say dull like there was an action, but I thought after Everton scored, they kind of took their foot off the gas and West Ham, to my surprise, sort of started putting their foot on the gas a little bit more. Bowen with a good goal to kind of, salvage a point for West Ham. I don't know if this was a shock to you or myself. Graham Potter being sacked. I don't know if this was a day or a couple days before this game. I think we both sort of were saying that we could possibly see that happening, but we didn't see it necessarily happening this early. So I think his sacking was sort of a surprise and a shock that it came so early. A quick appointment of Nuno, which I think, Nuno is a great coach, but I don't know how well he will suit that particular West Ham team and that set of players. Just because we both know Nuno has a very sort of particular style of play, and I don't think that, West Ham necessarily play in that way. Not to say that, he can't change it around, but it's gonna be interesting to see. I'm interested to see what Nuno does with that team. I think right away coming in, we'd spoken about the midfield and it being not up to par. I think he sat sort of Graham Potter's two starting midfielders, Souček and Ward-Prowse, who were the two starting midfielders under Graham Potter. Well, and actually he didn't sit Souček, he's suspended, but the midfield he started with is a completely different midfield, right? He brought in Magasa, Fernandez, and Paqueta. So I thought, they looked a little bit more solid in the midfield, which, I think Nuno always is going to focus on that. Kind of makes you wonder why Graham Potter didn't really see that, right? But good result, I think, for West Ham getting a point away to Everton. I think a little disappointing from Everton as far as, I was expecting to see a little bit much or a little bit more from them, but good result. I think a deserved result, a draw there.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway from this game too. I mean, I watched it on the Monday, and like you said, not very exciting kind of game, but I think from the perspective of West Ham where they are, I think 1 point is always a decent, especially in Nuno's first game for what the coach that he is and what he goes for. He's looking for something solid. So from West Ham that's been leaking goal to have a 1-1 point in a way, I think that's a good result for them. So watching the game, yeah, it was some good performance individually, I think, from both teams. Wasn't anything exciting, but a deserved 1-1, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of concludes the match week. I think it was an exciting match week, full of drama, full of controversial refereeing decisions, full of upsets. Sort of what we love about the Premier League, right? Hopefully we get more in the next match week. Any closing thoughts on the match week before we jump into our predictions?
Yeah, no, I think it was just, like I said, just an interesting match week above all. I mean, for us Chelsea fan, obviously a depressing one, but I mean, in terms of the Premier League, just interesting. Liverpool losing their first game, Arsenal winning. I think that was That was a big one right there. And then also, Wolves picking up their first points, like we said, West Ham grabbing a point, those promoted teams doing well, as we talked about in the previous pod. Overall, it was a good weekend for the Premier League.
Moving into next match week, our top four is Liverpool, Arsenal, Crystal Palace, Spurs, and our bottom three is Burnley, West Ham, Wolves. So interesting to see if anything changes there after match week 7. I guess we'll jump into our predictions. First up, we have Bournemouth at home hosting Fulham. What are your thoughts on this one?
This being the first kickoff of match week 7, and being at home to Bournemouth, I'm expecting a Bournemouth win, especially watching Fulham last weekend. I think I'm gonna go for a 3-1 Bournemouth win. Obviously, Fulham is one of those teams that could do something interesting on any day, but based on right now, I'm gonna go on the 3-1 Bournemouth.
I kind of agree with you. I think Bournemouth will win this game. I think I'm gonna go 2-1 instead of 3-1, but I think Bournemouth will win. I agree. Leeds Spurs is the next one. This is gonna be an interesting game. I think it's interesting to see how Spurs kind of bounce back from that draw to Wolves. They're away to Ellen Road. I think it'll be. I don't think that it'll necessarily Spurs will run away with it, but I could I could see this game being a draw, but I'm gonna give Spurs the benefit of the doubt, and I'm gonna go 2-1 Spurs.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting game. I think this is going to be a good game. I think Leeds will perform in this game. It being at home to Leeds as well, I'm going to go for the draw. I'm going to go 2-2.
All right, I like that. Arsenal West Ham, Nuno at the helm. I think he'll have a full week of training. I would have loved to have caught West Ham with Graham Potter, given how the season's gone so far. But Arsenal at home to West Ham. What are your thoughts?
Honestly, I think it would be a solid performance from West Ham. But I still think not solid enough to kind of stop Arsenal. I think it would be I'm gonna go I want to say 3-0, but I'm gonna go 2-0 Arsenal.
All right, I agree with you. I think West Ham will look better. Um, I think Arsenal being at home, this will be their second home game in a row after the midweek Champions League game. So I think Arsenal will find ways to break down West Ham. I'm gonna go 3-0. Next game, United Sunderland. This is a doozy. I'm gonna let you go first while I think about what I'm gonna do because I honestly have no idea.
Yeah, I think this is a banana slip or a banana peel for Man United, honestly, especially in the way they're playing right now. We've seen Sunderland, like we talked about last weekend, just sat in against Forest, right? So I think they've shown that they're okay with the other teams having the ball. And I mean, for these newly promoted team, who wouldn't be okay with the other teams having the ball, right? So I think it would be I don't know. I think it's going to be an interesting game, honestly. I don't know. I can see Sunderland winning, and I can also see Man United winning. They need to win. They're at home. This will give them a chance. They just lost 3-1 to Brentford. So I'm going to go, honestly, for this one, I don't see United scoring much. I don't see Sunderland being as open. So I'm going to go 2-1 United.
All right. I kind of agree with you. I can see this one either way. I'm gonna go with 3-1 United. I think what's gonna happen is I think United will get a goal and kind of open up the game a little bit, force Sunderland out more, and I think that they'll hit them on the counter a couple times. But I think United will get caught out once for sure. All right, probably the most difficult game of the match week to call, just given sort of recent performances. Chelsea Liverpool. I think it's gonna be difficult. I think Chelsea obviously losing their last two in the league. Liverpool losing their first in the league and then losing midweek. It's gonna be an interesting game. I don't know if Allison's gonna be fit. He came off with an injury. Same thing with Ekatike. So I don't know. I honestly don't know how to call this game. Part of me wants to say Liverpool will win, and then I think, part of me will say that it'll be a draw. But I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go 3-2 Liverpool win on this one.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one to call. I mean, on recent performance from us, um, it hasn't given us much, hopes. And even if we are going to finish the game with 10 men, I think there's just lots of question about that. Um, yeah, it's an interesting one, honestly. Interesting because I could see Liverpool finding a way, especially with the way we're playing at the moment and our center backs being a worry. But I can also see, for what I've seen from Liverpool in the last few games, that being an effect on them. So I'm gonna go with my heart and go for my team and go 2-1 Chelsea.
I love that. And I hope that you're absolutely spot on with that one. Next up, Villa Burnley. I think this one, I don't necessarily see this being a difficult one to call. I think Villa will win this game. I think that Burnley will sort of put up a fight, but I just don't see them having enough to keep Villa out, especially, given winning their first game of the season. I think that, they're at home, they're on a high from that. We'll see what they do midweek in the Europa League, but I think Villa come away with a victory here. I wanna say 2-0.
Yeah, I think from the victory last weekend, I think Villa will pick it up as well. I can see them building momentum from that. I mean, it's also home to Villa, right? So I think it gives them a little bit of more, to go for the victory. So I'm gonna go 3-0.
Everton home at the Hill Dickinson Stadium. Um, I love saying that name. I mean, it just doesn't make sense as a stadium name, but, um, Everton home to Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace undefeated in the league. I think Crystal Palace will win this game 2-1.
Honestly, think this will be a tight game. I can see this being a draw. I'm gonna go for a 1-1 draw. I
Alright?
think both teams can be very, very sound, so I'm gonna go for a 1-1 draw.
I can definitely see that playing out as well. Newcastle Forest, this is gonna be an interesting one. Newcastle home, Forest kind of, haven't had the greatest start. I think it's gonna be interesting to see sort of, Ange and how he handles Newcastle. I'm gonna go with a shock result here. I'm gonna give Ange his first victory in this game. I'm gonna give him a 2-1 victory over Newcastle.
I am not as nice as you, honestly, my mate. So I'm gonna go with a 2-0 victory for Newcastle. I think Eddie Howe and his team is gonna be too sound defensively for Forest, and we know Ange's team is gonna lead goals. So, like I said, it could be an upset as well. You could be right, we could win, and could be egg on my face next week. But I'm gonna go with a 2-0 Newcastle.
That brings us into Wolves Brighton. Wolves getting their first point of the season, and I don't think that they will get their second. If I'm being honest, I think Brighton will win this game. I'm gonna go 2-0 Brighton away to Wolves.
I think Wolves had a good performance in the week, and I think it's something they can build from. Obviously, a couple games in, and we just haven't seen that Wolves that we've known them to be. So I'm gonna go for the shock here, and I'm gonna go 2-1 Wolves, especially being at home.
I like that. Wolves with their first 3 points. Brentford City. This is gonna be an interesting game. I know I mentioned earlier that I think City will start picking up results and just get better. I think that we'll learn a little bit about City in this game. I'm honestly interested to see how this plays out. I know I said City's gonna get results, but for some reason, something in me just, is saying that this is gonna be a draw. But you know what? Honestly, I feel like City might actually come away with it. I'm gonna go 3-2 City.
Yeah, I think City is gonna win, honestly. I think it's gonna be a tight game. I think Brentford's gonna make it tough for City. I don't think it's gonna be an easy game, but I'm gonna go 3-1 City. Erling Haaland is on fire at the moment, so
You bringing him into your fantasy?
I don't know if I have enough money for him, mate,
I think
honestly.
that's something that we're all struggling with. All right, well, that concludes our predictions and our recap of match week 6. Fun match week, I'd say. Interesting match week. The Prem sort of always delivers. Any closing from you?
No, just interested to see what happens. I mean, this is the last match week before that international break, so the results will be interesting. Obviously, you will be keeping a close eye on our result with against Liverpool, and just the rest of the games. There's some interesting games to come. So yeah,
All right, absolutely. Well, you're absolutely right. I will be keeping a close eye on that game, the Chelsea Liverpool game. I hope you guys can come away with something. I hope that we can continue winning, and I hope that every other team in the Premier League loses, if that's even possible. That's it from us. Thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you guys next week.